Well Rooted is brought to you by Gerard and Associates CPAs. With locations throughout Los Angeles, Gerard and Associates has been guiding entrepreneurs and creatives towards realizing their dreams for over 20 years. Discover how they can support your vision at gerardcpa.com. Hey, it's Haneen, and I'm back with another episode of Well Rooted. Today is part 2 of Lana Salah's interview. It was such a great experience to get to speak with Lana that I couldn't even fit everything that I wanted to talk to her about into one episode. So she was so kind and generous to come back. This woman is full of such great insight. Today, we really delve more into her comedy experience, her acting experience, and her industry experience. We even go a little bit into dating and sort of bridging our Arab culture and how that works out into our American cultures as well. It's a very fun episode. You guys need to check it out. Please welcome Lana once again onto Well Rooted. Hey, it's Haneen, and I'm back with another episode of Well Rooted. I'm joined once again with Lana Salah.
Hey,
Thank you for coming back.
thank you for having me back.
Oh, I'm so excited. I was actually just looking at our episode. I was
Oh,
watching it
okay.
yesterday,
Oh, nice.
and my husband was like over my shoulder. He's like, "She's good." I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "She's smart." I'm like, "No, I'm telling you, like we would have sat there another 2 hours if I didn't have to go pick your children up from school. Like she's
Yeah.
like, you're so
She
fun."
can't shut up.
No, but you never know, like honestly, how people are going to be. Like, obviously, you're an amazing
Yeah.
performer, and I
Yeah.
saw that beforehand. But then it's like you don't really
The
know
person behind and kind of what's like what's
exactly.
their
Yeah.
process. Yeah. So, no, I've always been a nerdy, like brainy kid that was in like math club and science club
Oh,
and stuff like that. So,
your parents must have been so proud.
I don't even know if it was just like those were all kind of the choices. Like I wasn't really like they weren't really super progressive, especially for the time.
Mm,
So it was more academic stuff that we were like, supposed to focus on. So that's what I did.
yeah. And you're like, I was great at
I'm like,
it.
it's cool, I got a good check. Like it's
Yeah.
could have been worse.
Yeah, because I mean, you're a professional, you own your own business, you're an
Yes.
entrepreneur. Um, and where did comedy come into play?
So comedy's always been like a love of mine since I was young, since I was a teenager. And when my family moved us to the Middle East, the access this is like pre kind of access to internet. We're still in like early dial-up days
Mm,
at that time. I don't want to age myself, but I was born before the internet. So
same, I think.
so yeah, so and Google and all that. But yeah, so we didn't have that much. So being in the Middle East was kind of like, whatever we could find on VHS, whatever we can get. So it was almost like we were trading in these, like, like whoever can get a VHS tape. And then whatever like family members in America would send us like recorded on like VHS
Mm,
tapes. So that's kind of how I kept up while I was in Jordan. Of course, there's local comedy and there was local performers and stuff and a lot of comedy. Pretty much, I think like the majority of comedy in the Middle East is political, which
yeah.
I think is like an interesting kind of dichotomy with what's comedy now in America, where people are like, oh, politics is divisive, it shouldn't be in comedy. So it's interesting because like that's the only comedy like they did in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And so I was always like into it, and then when I came to America, um like necessity, I got to work. So I started working. And I remember I would, go to shows and I would meet, comedians. And I was like, oh, I really, people would tell me all the time, like, you're so funny, you should do this. And so that's all I remember told the comedian, it was like years ago. And I was like, I always kind of wanted to do comedy. He goes, yeah, you shouldn't do it. And, and I was like, oh, and he said, yeah, it's just not like, a place for it's like people don't want to see like attractive female comedians. And I was like, oh, he's like, can you name one that you know? And I was like, again, for the times, and it was like different. And also the female comedians that, you know, um, for let's just say from the 90s and because I was mostly watching stuff from the 90s. A lot of the comedians I watched are dead now.
Mm-mm.
So, so kind of like that, it just kind of like discouraged me, I guess, in a way, but I was also, again, just on the career track and stuff. And then I just, I've always explored different creative endeavors over the years. I've always looked for, work is great and work is work, but we're always trying to find different ways to express our creative energy. And so I had studied improv over the years. Improv wasn't necessarily my medium, but I was like, oh, maybe this is an interesting. And then I just was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go and do comedy. Like I'm doing, I'm just gonna go and I signed up and took a class. And I was like, and people kind of laugh. It's like, who takes a class? Like, I don't care how. Like, I'm a nerd. I'll go take a class,
Yeah.
something to get me, and I think the other thing that kind of made it scary, because it was always very, it's like something I liked and I admired, but I just had horrible stage fright. And I always knew that if I wanted to do it, I would have to overcome that. And I just like anything, it's like, oh, will like delay or whatever. So I think like coming face to face with that was really like what kind of put it off for me was like, one of the biggest fears that humans is fear of embarrassment.
Hmm.
I mean, we think that's really funny now, considering the kinds of fears that we think about people in the Middle East and things they face, fear of actual death. But in the psyche, fear of embarrassment is almost like tantamount to fear of death. It has that like weight for people, so it can be like, debilitating,
Yeah.
right? So eventually I just was like, as long as I just try this and keep doing it like all, and I did after first times, it would be like I would just to me they wouldn't see it. I would think that I would just be shaking.
Mm.
And and I now when I see people doing it, I can see when they're shaking. I think because I remember when I was shaking and I used to think like I hope this stops. I hope it doesn't do this like every time that I'm up there. I'm just going to be like, but just like anything, like a muscle, you work at it and you work out and you hope it gets better. So yeah, so I mean, I'm glad I did it. I had to come that. I thought like public speaking in general you know, um, is scary, but also like public speaking with like strong opinions, like in
Hmm.
times where people are like, we don't want to hear from women on these topics. Like,
Exactly.
like there's a crusade of men on the internet just go online every day just to tell female comedians, you're not funny. Like,
Yeah, and you know what's interesting is, well, actually, I saw something yesterday and it made me think of you, and I want to get your take on
hmm
this. So, Whitney Cummings a few years ago had made a comment where she had said in the past, for a woman to even be tolerated in comedy, you had to hate yourself.
I,
What's your take on that?
I mean,
She did retract that recently based off of, the comedians she sees today, but do
yeah.
you still feel like that applies?
So I think that again, like generationally, people we've changed, right? I do think that there is kind of there still is like the type of people that are attracted and go into comedy. It's a certain type of person. There's a lot of people with emotional things, mental health. There's a lot of different kinds of people,
Mm.
and it is like a man's world,
Yeah.
generally speaking. So when you just imagine like that it's that man's world and in general like men have been resistant to let women come into their spaces, so there it almost feels like there is like hazing. There is
Mhm.
like a feel, so that's where it probably comes from, where it's like you got to hate yourself a little bit because
Mhm.
you got to be able to, deal with that and kind of roll with the punches, as they say, and kind of in order to be uh, taken seriously or respected. Do I think it's still like that? I think there's spaces that they try it's like we try to have safer spaces and there's
Mhm.
definitely more of that, and there's like women's only spaces. And so I do think that it has morphed. Again, I was told many years ago like you shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
So flat out, like that was just like, we're talking like almost 20 years ago. So to have to think of people that are in my generation that started out doing it 10, 15, then yes, it was. Is the opportunity the same? Like if you try to like I would say that in my opinion, whether it's corporate or any kind of business, you will run into a certain amount of like toxic like
Mm.
culture. There's I don't think I've been in any kind of like, male dominated space that didn't have some kind of toxic culture going on in there. And comedy is no different. And I think there is sometimes this idea or things that come up. It's like guys won't do anything, because it is like if a female comedian wants to be, known, it's like guys won't do anything for you unless they want to sleep with you, or they want. So there's still this aspect of like, they'll put a girl on a show. It's like there's that going on.
Right.
But that's in every, like, I still think that exists in like every business.
Yeah.
So do I think it's like true for 100%? I don't think it's true for 100%, but I do think there is some aspect that it's like maybe you got to have like a thick skin where
Mm-hmm.
it's like you will encounter the spectrum. And again, like I don't know if no, because it happened recently. There was a recent incident in the comedy community here in LA, in the open mic community, where one open micer physically assaulted a female open
No.
micer, and they were trying to kind of rally. The police didn't want to arrest him because it was misdemeanor, but um, basically there was a lot of chatter now around like, how did this happen? Did this, this guy was around for a while, and did he just snap? And it's like, again, you're not like, this isn't a community filled with people that have like, PhDs, or like, not to say that that makes anybody better, but it
Mm-hmm.
just, you're talking about, to be compelled to do comedy, you probably went through maybe some trauma, maybe some, there's a lot of different like reasons why people go
Right.
into it. So yeah, I do think that put a bunch of those people in a room, you probably do want to have a thick skin.
Yeah. And you're
But
like, I have
yeah.
the thickest skin of them all. I'm a
Yeah,
Palestinian woman.
I feel like that because I was talking to there was a clip that was circulating that, oh my God, it had me dead. I had to send it to my family, but it was um it's not funny in the sense that it's like they're bombing Tel Aviv, and there's like Israelis that were like freaking out, like, the girl was having a panic attack, whatever it was. So that's not funny. She's having a panic. What was funny is there's a Palestinian guy filming her, and you can hear his commentary, and we're so funny.
We
Like
are.
like I don't like, and that's why when I go, like, people go, what are the Palestinians good at? We're good at dark humor, okay? Because
Yeah.
all I could do was hear him going. All he said to her was, لا تخافي يا بنت الناس الموتة موتة واحدة. And I was just like, I'm done.
Like, how
I'm
do you come
done.
up with this stuff?
Like
It's
Americans have YOLO, we have like YODO. You only die once.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
just don't chill. It's only gonna happen one time. And so like I think like that maybe is a part of what makes us like naturally thick-skinned, because nobody wanted us. Like
Yeah.
we're operating on that like premise
Yeah.
that nobody wants us. So we're here in spite of all that.
So
So it's like,
true.
what can you do?
Hmm.
So yeah, but I mean, I think Whitney might have a different opinion about it now, probably.
Yeah.
You
I could
know,
see that.
I do think like sometimes maturing in a business and spending, you spend a couple decades in any business, you kind of start to see it differently as well. But when you're coming up and you're young, it's tough.
Hmm.
Like I said, in corporate, I had similar issue. Like there was, like I felt like you kind of do have to hate yourself to get ahead in this life as a woman,
Mm.
because they want. It's like, why are you here? You should be somewhere else.
Right.
There's kind of that going on
Yeah.
sometimes. And I remember my first job in the Middle East. The only reason why this is funny was I worked for a company that was like a Middle East financial network website. It was like a financial news site, and they wanted to start a credit card marketplace. And it was the first one in the Middle East, so I had a list of banks, and I had to call all the banks and like, give my pitch and like, hi, we're starting this marketplace. So I went to go call the banks in Saudi,
Mhm.
and I get on the phone with a Saudi, I think I called Saudi American Bank it was, and I ask for the GM, and this man gets on the phone, and I'm telling it to him in Arabic, and he says, I don't know if it was Arabic or English I spoke to him, but he responded to me in Arabic, and he was like, Shanu? And I said, what? And he basically said, like, how are you calling me? And I said, what? He goes, what? I said, I'm calling you about this. He goes, no, I mean, why? How are you out of the house calling me on the phone now?
Wow.
And I was like, oh.
You're like, oh, you're one of those. Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you for your time. so so when you start out like that in the job world, you're like, yeah, it can't get like,
Yeah, you're like, bring it on.
it's like, who let you out of the house? It was his words were, who let you out of the house?
Wow.
Okay. I was like, I had just got out of college and I
Damn.
was like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And I get up there and the first thing I do is like, who let you out of the house? I'm like, you're right, sir.
You're
You're
right. Just
absolutely
let
right.
me
Let
go
me
back to the
let me go back
kitchen.
home and like knock my head in the
Oh my
you had
goodness.
to hate yourself
Yeah.
to be working as a woman in the Middle East at that time.
Because it's always like as if you're doing something you shouldn't be doing just by
Yeah.
being there.
Just well, it's like somebody asked me the other day, like, what about Palestine? It's like, oh, do you tell something about do you tell political jokes or something when you do political? I said, well, said, if you've dealt with Israelis, did you have political disagreements? And I said, only if you believe that my existence is political, then
Hmm.
yes, we've had a lot of political disagreements.
Right.
And he's like, oh, touche. Like, what do you mean? What a political? My entire existence is political,
Yeah.
okay, to a large group of people. So,
Yeah.
like, just saying something, you end up in that, like, bucket of like, now you have to dig your way out
Hmm.
from like under it. So,
Yeah.
I never took that for granted because I always started like from that place of like, who let you out of the house? I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
And
cool.
that is so important right now, I think more than ever, just because I feel like so I grew up reading like Chelsea Handler, Amy
Yes, I used to,
Schumer.
yes,
Like I
yes,
was like
yes.
that
I
was kind of
remember. Yeah.
like my friends and I were so into that. Um and I think comedy's mostly been told from the white female perspective for
Yeah.
so long. Obviously there's some amazing black female comedians, but they're just not given the platforms that the white female comedians have as far as like producing and writing their own films and television shows and just having better opportunity. So for me now to have the experience of seeing a Palestinian female be on stage, it just resonates a lot more with me. And I know it
Yeah.
does with so many other people because your worldview and your experiences echo a lot of what me and so many of my friends and maybe even my mom and my aunts and just my cousins, like just our community in general. And to have that, like, finally, it's like to have you say these things out loud, it's like, okay, finally, like, it's not
Yeah.
just me and like someone who's been through such similar experiences. Have you gotten that type of feedback from
Y-
other women?
yes, and also even not just from other women, like I have that kind of experience with other comedians that I meet that
Hmm.
are, like from the Middle East or from like or when I see other comedians go up and talk about Palestine, I'm like, I feel like what like wow, like this is like finally, I see because even now, where we have comedians, some of them won't talk about it. And
Hmm.
so it's like there is that I'll see them after a show, I'll be like, thank you. Like that, like really, even though we're in the same community, it gives that human side of me is like somebody's saying it. And
Yeah.
so I do in terms of like shows that I've done, what's interesting is I think a lot of the shows that I do, it's I've had people come up to me after, and I think most of the people that are at the shows that I do are not Middle Eastern, not, and so a lot of the times that people come up to me, it's like they feel like they learned something, or they feel like they want to share, like they want to talk about like what's going on over there, and I feel like there's a lot of receptiveness to people. Like it's like I don't expect people to walk up to me after, but there's always people that walk up to me after and go, I really, really enjoyed what you said. I really like, appreciate, and it's like really, and they want to, it's almost like it gives people the freedom to talk about how they feel about it
Hmm.
when a lot of places and times they feel like they can't do it. So
Yeah.
it's like you're giving them that, like, yes, like this is exactly how I feel about it. Like,
Yeah.
thank you for saying it. And so, and like even whether it's even at shows, like I see it a lot. Like I post a lot online, and I do a lot, and I see a lot of people online that are like, this is exactly like because there's a lot of people speaking on behalf of Palestinians online, and or saying like, we think this is what the Palestinians should think and want, and um and I think there's more and more voices that are popping up now
Hmm.
that have come up in this experience that are speaking out and saying things that I'm like, and they're funny about it. Or
Yeah.
and it reaches more people because of that. Because
Hmm.
we all know that, we all have so many facets to us as Arabs, and we have our funny, we have our this, and it's like that's the best way for us. Like we've come to that place where it's like, okay, we gotta tell them
Yeah.
jokes. They're not gonna listen. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
you
no,
know,
literally, that's how we
like,
get through to them, that's how we
yeah, like
infiltrate the
this is it,
system.
this is all we got to do is go up there and be like, hey, I'm nice, and non-threatening. And I think that's what our job is, I
Mhm,
guess, because it isn't, it isn't like I think every group has had that experience, like moment in their, like where they're like, we need our voices to be heard. And I think that for Arabs and Palestinians specifically, I think it's getting to that, like, we're at that like peak phase. It's like, okay, because we're always like, we got to center, the
mhm,
people's voice, we got to center the voices. So it's like, we got to center the voices.
yeah,
So I think having people, and that way, when people want to talk about it, they can at least have an authentic or somebody that can,
yes,
if people are interested in it, they're pro, or but they want to, like, they have opportunities to go, oh, now there's people we can platform to
right,
talk about it, because we may not be the best authorities,
mhm,
or we may. So I think that's good that that's happening. And I think it's good that there's spaces like that. And I do think that the internet's one of the better, like, ways in terms of reaching, like, like more Arabs, because obviously we live in LA, and there's like, a certain
yeah,
I just actually spoke before this to the girls that are producing the hilarious Habibi show in
which
the
one?
Hollywood Improv.
Oh,
So it's like a Arab
how
show.
fun,
It's Lynn Maleh and Gina Jones,
okay,
and so we're I'm gonna send them. Hopefully, I'll get on. I'll be doing that
yeah,
show. So there's more. There's like, they're creating that, because
yeah,
now we're like, even on the internet we find each other, because I'll be like this,
exactly.
and somebody will be like, oh hey, how come I haven't seen you in this? Like, I didn't meet them personally, but we kind of navigate, and
Yeah.
we know a lot of the same
And
people.
it's really important, right? Like, especially right
Yeah.
now. And I want to say that I have always like participated in my community in some way, but I feel like over the past year, I've been diving deeper into it. And
Yeah.
like, I mean, that's kind of why I wanted to start this podcast also. Like, I want to meet you. I want to meet cool people, Arabs, Middle Easterners that are
Yeah.
doing amazing things and learn from them and hear their stories. And that to me is fulfilling, but it's also healing and it's also inspirational. So it's always exciting to get to like just hearing about that event. I'm like, I want to go. When is it?
Yeah, and it's like, I'll have to give you the info after, but it's
Yeah.
like, also like, I have nieces, and a lot of what I think about is that, like, we're in a different, this is all new ground. This
Hmm.
is all like, for them to be able to see their auntie, it's like, oh, she, like, I can do, like, I've always come from that idea that, like, you should be able to do anything you want to do,
Yeah.
and you have just as much of a right to be here as anybody else. So I think Arabs, like, taking up space and doing these things, and not being like, afraid, or you know what I mean. Obviously, we post 9/11, we were doing, it's like it's like, and there's still, you know what I mean. There's
Yeah.
still that, but just the fact that now we're at that place where it's like, oh, cool. There's like, I think there's like shows like that. I think they're doing the Arab American Comedy Fest. I think it's in New York. Like, there's all kinds of, spaces that are popping up where Arab comedians are getting together, and community is building, and there's ideas coming out of it. And just by us, like, being around each other and riffing, we come up, oh, hey, we should do a video about this. Hey, we should
Hmm.
talk. We come up with, because we all have similar, like,
Yeah.
experiences. So yeah, totally. I mean, my nieces are, like, I sometimes they'll come across my TikToks, and they'll just be like, I see them like or comment, and I'm
Oh.
just like, that's just like, it's like the cute. It's just like, that's
I
what
was
it
thinking
is.
earlier, I'm like I'm kind of jealous of Gen Z and this Gen Alpha that's
Yeah,
following because they get to grow up with far more representation
yeah.
than we did. I'm very excited for them, but I kind of wish I had some of that too growing up.
I know. We were always was like, oh, we gotta look like Barbie, and we gotta
Yeah.
be. It was all. I mean, it's just, it's complicated, right? Because until you get to a critical mass of people, there's nobody to fight for, because everything is dictated by, like, oh, how many people are going to buy that thing, or how
Mm-hmm.
many people are going to watch that thing. So they were always creating stuff for specific groups until they saw that there's a market for these people.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely a market for Arabs
Yeah,
doing comedy, or
100%.
just doing, anything. And we've always been like, like obviously you look at Egypt, they have the huge, like their own movie scene like Bollywood. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's always been like when we're dramatic, somebody like, we're so dramatic. We're so
So
dramatic,
dramatic.
like, like I said, in Mota Mota Wahde,
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, that's, that's just like where I feel like we naturally are, you know what I mean? Once we're given that, and like more and more, I think we're going to see that, and we'll see it like I'm sure we see some people in movies. We see more. You
Yeah.
saw Mo did the Mo's
Mo
show.
Ahmed,
Yeah,
amazing
a
work.
great show,
Rami, and like
Rami.
winning
So
the
we're waiting
Golden
for the
Globe.
girls one.
And that's what it is,
Yeah,
right? It's
because
like,
you
and I
watch
was
them
like,
both and you're like, this is,
I love
yeah,
them to death. I love what they're doing for the culture, but I'm like,
but it's
we
not
need
the
more
same
women
than
up
from a
there now
woman's perspective.
too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hope so, because I do think that there's a lot of things that we get from also being like non-traditional. It's like they'll call it non-traditional. I consider myself in a way a traditional person,
Hmm.
but people are like, oh, but you do this and you drink or you do smoke, things like this, and I'm like, I don't think that. It's like I'm still like I have traditional values, traditional
Yeah.
beliefs,
Like
and
it
things
doesn't
like that.
offset your identity.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's like, but I think girls, Middle Eastern girls and Arab girls, we bear the brunt of that
Mm,
much more than guys do. So it's like
100%.
and you're putting yourself out there in a vulnerable manner, and then you just get, like, oh, guys on my thing, like, kill yourself, like
Oh,
shit like
great.
that. And it's like,
Wonderful.
but like, it's really like, that's why it's important that, we also have these spaces and they kind of rally around us, because obviously, like, we need, men to support us in these endeavors too, because,
Mhm.
we need to all platform each other.
Yep.
But like, women do get the worst of it,
Hmm.
in terms of, and especially like, it's, being like, I remember when I got a call from, a cousin that was like, oh, the family found your YouTube videos. You're at this, and the family in the Middle East or whatever, and they were circulating
How,
it.
yeah, how is your family's reaction, if you don't mind me asking? Just because it is non-traditional in the
Yeah,
sense it's not what we grew up getting to see, right?
yeah. So, my dad lives in Jordan. He's
Hmm.
he's married. He lives over there, and so, they, and my mom and my siblings live in America.
Hmm.
And uh, it like, I don't think it's something that my dad and I really, my dad would be into, or that I would ever discuss with him. And I
Hmm.
know that, once they did kind of get into, oh, we found, the videos and stuff. I was expecting that though. I wasn't like, never, like,
Hmm.
I lived it. So I
Yeah.
know that talking about it publicly wasn't going to be better,
Hmm.
right? But it's like, there's only so much that you're going to, like, so long you're going to, like, live for other people, you know, and keep your head down for other people and things like
Hmm.
that. So, and again, like, I always, I'm kind of a pragmatist, like, you don't pay my bills, I'm gonna do what
Exactly.
like, I just,
Hey, I feel you. Like,
you want me to have an opinion, you could pick up a
but
bill.
honestly, like if you did keep your head down and you did, just kind of go,
They still had things to
they'd
say.
still
It
people
wouldn't
would still
matter.
find something to pick on no matter who it is.
It wouldn't
And
matter.
at the end of the day, you will be unfulfilled. You will not be living to your full potential. And
No.
it really then it doesn't serve you or your community because
And I think more
look at
about my
this.
nieces. That's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
I think more about the next generation, because I already know the previous I already know what their thoughts are. I know what their trauma is. I know what they're coming. I understand
Hmm.
why they are that way, but I also am like, I've had the blessing of being able to be educated, travel, uh, share spaces with all kinds of people from all backgrounds, religions.
Hmm.
Like, I've had that, so I can change my worldview, and I can also recognize that, like, the next generation has even a bigger gap in the
Yeah.
worldview from mine, or like the grandparents. So who's going to relate to them and connect with them? Not the grandparent, you know what I mean? So it's
That's
like,
true.
that's the only way left for us to sort of be like, have any kind of connection. If we're all just going to be like rejecting each other because, well, we don't accept that or we won't do that. But it's like, but eventually it's going to happen. It's happening. Like,
Hmm.
you can't stop your kids from doing things like you could do in the 80s. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like you can't, like child abuse used to be okay back then. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Now it's like, no, we have
Like
to talk.
how many shahatas are you really gonna keep
Like
throwing?
we were just joking with another comedian. I was like, this is my PTSD. He goes, what? I'm like, my post-traumatic shahata disorder. Like every once I'm like, oh, it's because I got too many shahatas. And then I think the younger generation didn't get the shahatas like we did.
Yeah.
So I do it because number one, maybe selfishly, it keeps me young
Mhm.
because I think staying open and staying always learning and always doing new things is really what genuinely keeps you young.
Mhm.
It keeps you like where your mind is always like, and you're always exploring. So that was number one. Number two, again, it's to stay connected. That's what keeps me young is when I'm connected to the younger like what's going on in the world. So that keeps me, also like young, and I'm not going to stay young forever, but more like mentally, like, that's the important thing is that we stay somewhat flexible
Mhm.
in this trying, times.
Yeah.
So they're not, the generations before us weren't as flexible and they didn't have as much flexibility given to them.
Mhm.
My dad was like a Nakba survivor. My grandparents were Nakba survivors, so they have an immense amount of trauma, and some stories we learned later, and I was just like, yeah, like I don't know how I would deal with that, cope with that personally. Like we got to go to therapy; they'll never go to therapy,
Mhm.
So there's so many. It's such a conflicting and I think that's a part of what makes us like get into comedy and do some of these things is because our journey is so complicated. It's like we love no matter what the situation, like we love our families, we love our parents, we love our, it's like we would love to have that, acceptance and togetherness, but sometimes because of all the different things, we don't get to have that. So I think like there's a lot of families that can also relate to that being different and being the black sheep and being cast out. And
Mhm.
so I probably do identify with that more than but I made those choices when I was very young, to come back to America. It was
Mhm.
already like a choice that if I was going to come back to America, that I was going to have to live a different life, that I was going to live a life kind of untethered from the traditional you live with your dad culture, like that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So being the first to like move on my own and live by myself as a woman was
Yeah.
like and I just feel like everything since then has been preparing my mom for this, for
Okay.
example. You know what I mean? Like,
That like you kind of were easing her into
yeah,
this.
like my mom just wants me to be happy
Of
and it's not
course.
like she's gonna sit and watch like my comedy videos and stuff. But I like that's one of the things that me and my mom would sometimes be on the phone, we'd laugh till we cry. Like we always have had that. So it's not like that she would be like, why would you do that? Like, so it's like we
Mhm.
kind of understand why, but it's also just the practice of doing it is like a little shocking to them.
Right.
Like she's like, just don't talk about me up there. She's like, don't
Like
say
I
stuff.
never.
Don't say stuff about me up there. I'm like, the only thing I say is that you're a badass and I'm scared of you. Like,
And I love you so
and
much
I'm
and
still scared of you. Don't hit me. Like, so, so that's, yeah, so that's it. But, siblings and nieces and nephew, everybody's like pretty much,
they're chill.
yeah, and like they'll like my videos and they'll, you know what I mean? So it's and again,
I
I'm
think it is
I'm
a
the
good
oldest living
bridge.
one out of all of them,
Yeah.
so what are they going to say to
And you're
me?
like you're living the life. I mean,
Yeah.
I love it. And I mean yeah, exactly what you said is correct. You are that bridge, and
Yeah.
like the younger you maintain this outlook, I think the stronger you make that bridge and that connection with the following generations. I want to ask you, because we didn't get into it last time.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm sure you've seen on Netflix, this is not sponsored by Netflix,
Mhm.
but there's that new Love is Blind Habibi
Yes.
coming out. I cannot wait to watch this.
I'm so done with Netflix. What
Really?
is? No, but I mean like how
How, like, how,
how are you going to
who's it?
rebrand arranged marriage like we didn't already invent that? How are you
I
gonna
mean, you
go?
already know it's going to be the best one
Well,
of
but
all
it's
the
just
Love is
like,
Blind,
but it's
but
like, isn't that what we've been
it's what
like?
we've been
What
doing.
we've been doing, and they're like, oh, now we're gonna call it Love is Blind, not just marriage. Okay,
Yeah.
we're gonna rebrand. We're gonna market it like it's like a blind date game when it's really like your parents are all doing a contract in the other room kind
Yeah.
of game. Okay, um, I don't know if you've seen, like, I joke about arranged marriage because I went through it and I went through the process, and my sisters did. They've passed on now, but I've been through more arranged marriage weddings than, most people can ever count. So I,
Sounds like a book that you
right?
should
Like
write.
there
Yeah,
is like,
yeah.
and as soon as I saw the ad for that, I was
Hmm.
like, it was like when they did, I feel like the bling, Dubai,
Dubai
whatever.
Bling.
I feel like that like makes sense because
Hmm.
of but I feel like the Love is Blind. I feel like, again, it's just like these people will probably go on to get married and like stay together for some time.
They will, yeah.
Like I feel like it's just like a Tuesday. Like,
Yeah,
you know
like
what
it'll work
I mean?
like really well
Yeah.
because
Like we'll be the
yeah,
best at
we're
it.
already
Like
conditioned for it to
we're
work
already
well.
good at this. Like
Yeah.
if we would get an A plus in anything, it'd be dictatorships and arranged marriage.
Oh my
Okay,
God.
like those are our
Literally.
things. Like
No, no, they will
hummus,
excel at this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just like, in that sense, yes, I'm excited to see because it's gonna be like, of all the Love Is Blind franchises, this is the only one where the people got together, stayed together. No, like,
There's
you
like
know what I
six
mean?
couples that make
They're
it to
just
the
like
altar.
married. Like by the time they get to the end of the show, one of them's already, two or three of them are already pregnant. Like it's
Yeah.
like that kind of thing, Like they're just it works out.
Yeah.
And I think that was the point of the whole original Love Is Blind franchise, was to bring. That's why it's funny, was we've come full circle, was to bring that to America
Hmm.
and to see how Americans would respond to that. And it's like, I think even now in the Middle East, it's different, obviously. Like
Yeah.
I'm talking about
They've
like
come a
over
long
20
way.
years ago,
Yeah.
right? So I completely acknowledge that, arranged marriage is a practice. It still happens,
Hmm.
but there's different, things and now they have dating apps and
Yeah.
and Muslim dating apps and
Hmm.
all kinds of things. Back in my day, it was just the moms and the women at the wedding would all
Oh
get
yeah.
together and
Weddings were the
you
were the
know,
go-to.
روحي ارقصي روحي go dance
Yeah, yeah,
روحي
yeah,
يلا روحي
yeah.
روحي. I'm like, Mom,
So and so's looking at you like,
yeah, it's like, okay, you
ooh.
gotta go. Like you're up there like shaking your hips,
Yeah,
save
yeah,
your life. Like,
yeah.
okay, pick me like livestock. But like, that's like, it's changed now. So how much so? Like I do recognize that people are still getting married that way, but I do think it's not as like it used to be more forceful in my day.
Mm,
Like I feel like it was much more like, you gonna do this. But I think now, they have to be much more like cool about it, like chill
yeah.
about it. Like, now they have what is that thing called now in the Middle East? Like in Jordan and some of these places, it's called um like family services, or like
Oh,
it's like a it's like حماية maybe it's حماية الأسرة. I don't know. Something like this, where it's basically like for um domestic disputes,
okay.
situations, like this didn't exist in my
Oh,
day.
it's like
Like,
a it's a
yeah, like if
do
you
you
had
call
like
them
a
like
it's
this
like
place and
yeah, it's
they
almost like if you had like a marital dispute or something, and there's a place that you would go and they would
that is
like
hilarious. I'm sorry.
you know what I'm talking about?
No,
Oh
but
yeah, I didn't know that until like I went when I was there the last time. Somebody was, and I saw it on
they
the
must be
sign.
so busy.
Yeah, but I also think there's still a stigma around it, right? Like
Yeah.
like that's the reason why that didn't it's like there was always a stigma. So
Hmm.
now like what there is no such thing as domestic violence. There's no such thing as marital
Yeah.
violence. Like this is all, so I think like those things have changed, and therefore the way arranged marriage is applied have changed. But that's why I think it makes sense that Love Is Blind, the Habibi version, is because it's like it would be the time that it would be like, okay, we're
Yes.
about there now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're about to put it on Netflix,
And I want to ask you really quick. So there's a set that I saw of yours on
Mhm.
social media where you talk about how back, like how we grew up, you focus on the three P's for
Yes.
relationships, which
Yes.
are the three P's are
Protect, provide, and procreate.
yes,
Yeah.
and like here they got it all mixed up.
Yeah.
If you had to pick maybe two qualities of our marriage slash like marriage relationships and how we navigate that in our culture to apply
Hmm.
to LA dating,
I think
what would you pick?
I think a lot of people get caught up on provide, right? It's
Mm,
a big like men will have like parades and marches over this. Okay. So I think like if for LA, I would say if people can just get like the protect and like some provide,
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the best because I don't think you should procreate if you can't do any of those. Like, you
That's
know
a
what I
good
mean?
point.
You know what I mean?
That's
Like,
a
I
really good
just think
point.
like, what if like, you
Some of them
know,
are just good at like procreate and
yeah,
they're kind of
it's like I that's
bypassing.
why I feel like you shouldn't really pass the steps, but like I do think that if you find somebody where there is that, kind of that you care about each other's, protect well-being and this and that you contribute to each other's like well-being and in
Mhm.
your betterment, then there could naturally be a part of time where you procreate. But I think until you get through that, like nobody like procreating is by accident usually then.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, but it's like for you to feel like, oh, I'm like, at least for me, like, like you would want to be like, are we going to bring a kid into this world? Can you afford it? Can I afford it? Are we
Yeah.
doing like,
Yeah.
So I do think if people could feel a little bit more like, like protective over each other.
Mhm.
Like that's something in our culture that I think like when I don't know about you, but when you go out and you navigate and you deal with friends, like I bring a lot of that like Arabic, it's like we're so like, whereas sometimes like Western culture is a little more,
Mhm.
so I'm trying to somewhere in the middle there. But like when I get like to know people, it's like now it's like, well, we're all like 100%. Like
Right.
we're not holding back like the 50%. We're
Yeah.
all the 100%. And so to be able to be in a relationship where it's like your 100% is out there and that person's like, I see your 100% and we're cool and like I'm going to, like be the like the wall or like, and I think that's what if people could arrive at that at least in LA, that would be good, but like you have to be willing to be vulnerable and put your 100% out there because a
Mhm.
lot of people are like, hedging their bets, so
Yeah.
I think that's a big problem in dating in terms of like, well, I want this person to like me and this and that. It's like, no, what you need to do is you need to be, you know, be yourself, like find your like place that you feel good and you're yourself and then somebody else that's like good with you is going to be like, okay, like we're, now we're good together and now we can build something together. But trying to change yourself completely or trying to change yourself just enough to get a certain kind of person, other
Mhm.
person, like those things aren't bound, they're not sustainable.
Yeah.
So I think like even just protecting a little bit, like you work, I work, we're doing, you know what I mean? Things like
Right.
that. Whereas in our culture, and I think the idea of like the man provides everything and that's great. I'm not
Mhm.
like I'm all about like in a marriage and this kind of stuff, like for sure. But I think like people get, you know, um, in dating, if you're gonna get like really, caught up on certain things, first of all, like know that if you are looking for just like money, so are a lot of other people.
Mhm.
And it's like a race,
Yeah.
so you need to be like sensible about that and understand that like there's all kinds of people in that race with you
Mhm.
and be realistic about that. But if you're like, reasonable, I talk to my nieces and I tried, it's like we all have to be like, sometimes it feels like the world is ending. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you're like, let's focus on like what are the things that are tangible and achievable and the things that we can, like being healthy, being, these kind of things versus like I want somebody rich enough to take me first class to it's
Mm.
like all that's great, but
Mhm.
like, it's just like fleeting too, So I think we're very caught up about money in LA. We're very caught up about all these things. And people should work hard to make as much money as they can for sure, but feeling like that's going to be the safety net. You're just going to find somebody that's going to like
Yeah.
take care of all that for you.
Yeah, no,
Like
I agree.
it's not, it's not the way it used to be. You
Exactly.
used to be able to buy a house for like a couple hundred G's. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
so you could be like, واحد كان يفتح بيت. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
like my mahar was like dinar, like
Oh
like
yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
we don't and the akhir was like whatever it was. So with inflation now we're talking 5000 or something,
You
but
right?
still what's 5000?
Yeah.
And then you have your dahab. And so it used to be like we were like part of my culture that I always respect and appreciate is this idea that we should make sure that if we take something from the woman, that we're adding some value in, right? So I
Absolutely.
do, even though that gets mixed up in a lot of
Yeah.
situations, but I do believe that, and if women, we ourselves practice that instead of thinking it is just like provide, it's more like if I'm going to give to a man, like there should be some that comes back to
Exactly.
me. You can't just be like giving, giving, giving and being
Right.
depleted. So I think if more of us like, and that comes from just, you have a value for yourself. But we
Right.
as Middle Eastern women, it's almost like even when our situations are bad, I think because we come from that, we're always like a little like, like, yeah, my dad did that for me or what, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? So I think like we might have a little bit more of that like pre-built into us, but it shouldn't like, it should be, I think, a little bit for everybody. I think we should all treat ourselves that way,
Yeah.
like, and I'm not asking anybody for anything I can't do for myself,
Yeah. 100%.
so
But yeah, no, but to your point, like that is really meaningful how, just being protected and you protecting the other person and them protecting
yeah,
you, knowing that you have someone's back and they have yours. And it involves giving that 100%.
yeah.
And you have to be willing to be that vulnerable.
And you can't be like, oh, maybe something better is around the corner. And that's a big
Exactly.
LA thing
That
where
is
it's like
huge here. It's so
huge. It's
sad.
like always like looking for the next best
Mm-hmm.
thing and people are, clout chasing and this like that. Look, I lived here a long time and I've seen a lot of clout. And I think maybe to a fault, like it's just so much easier to just be authentic and true to yourself about it because it's nothing is going to last forever. P Diddy's going to prison for a long time.
Yes, he
Okay.
is.
like
Yes, he
like
is.
so it's like again, it's like the guy, I keep going back, I'm always going to remember that you only die once.
You only die
Okay?
once.
You only live once and you only die once. So it's like,
Absolutely.
if you're living like you're never going to die, then that's one thing, and if you're, living like you're only going to die, that's another thing. But really, people are clout chasing. How many people are going to go down with Diddy? How
Yeah.
many
I
people,
don't
like
know,
there's
but
a
I
lot of
can't
that.
wait to find out.
There's so like if you're in at like the business and the industry, like it's really so much smaller than people because there's we always knew that there was the Jamie Foxx parties, the P Diddy there were
Mm.
people whose parties that
I
were
didn't hear
known,
about this.
the
I'm
Drake parties.
assuming just being in the
Yeah,
industry.
just being,
Yeah.
not even then, just being a girl,
Yeah.
girls, Instagram baddies, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, of course.
we're out there, being like generational baddies. So it's like that's international calling card wherever you go. So that's why it's like there were women going in and out of there. LA is just a parade of women coming in and leaving,
Yeah.
when just coming off the bus and like starting new.
LA is so, I mean, it's like nowhere
It's not for the
else.
weak.
It's definitely not for the
Yeah.
weak. You can definitely handle it. You're
Well, you
killing
got to
it
be
here.
grounded. You got to be rooted. Not even rooted. You got to be like, if you're not grounded, you can get lost in the sauce. And
Yeah.
people will tell you all kinds of, I literally, like my first so many years in LA, and guys would still walk up to me like, baby, I can make you famous. Like, again, if you are easily like suggestible, if you are not grounded, if you come from a, bad home, there's so many things that are risk factors for, just being scammed in LA or being, there's so many people here. People come here for a variety of reasons to do, and there's so much money here and
Hmm.
fame. So like all the cautionary tales, they're real. So I think like I said, I've always been, this nerdy person. So I always just go like, I'm just gonna like be nerdy and think, I don't care if people think I'm a buzzkill. I don't care. Like
Yeah.
I like I'll draw like I'm not I'm that's I think saved my life in so many situations where I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like y'all go ahead.
Yeah.
So
I could definitely see that. Like
y- you
that
know,
must really come in handy just having that mindset and those roots already
life
in place,
saving.
like you said.
Life saving.
Yeah.
Because if you, as a woman, and again, like you have like come I was here in LA by myself, I don't have any
Hmm.
family, and you're out and about, and there's it's like I remember for the longest time I was just working corporate America, but like, oh, do you want to be a model? Everybody was trying to get me to do modeling and music videos. I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
want to do none of that.
Um,
The only time I modeled, I ended up doing like a couple of Kia commercials with Adriana Lima. So like
Oh,
I
wow.
was I was like, like I always felt like, that's why I kind of like comedy, because entertainment as an industry can be very sleazy in a lot of things. And depending on like, you have to be in a legitimized otherwise you're still dealing with a lot of seediness. Like
Mm.
there's a certain point where you get above it, but
Mhm.
before that you're just kind of down there with everybody else in the pits, right? So I think a lot of bad things happen in the pits,
Mhm.
and that's where a lot of people just tap out,
Okay.
right? But again, like if you treat it like a business, if you treat it like, also like you're like people will be like, what are they willing to do for money, right?
Mm.
How much are you willing to do for $1,000? That's the question that people need to know. How much are you willing to do for $1,000 when you're broke? When you're, and I think I've all aside from just like I'm good, I've always been like, if I've been in a situation where I'm broke, I'm like, I'll just go get a job.
Mhm.
Like I I'll
I'll
just
figure it out.
I'll just go. Like I remember like applying for the US Census to be a census taker. I'm like, let me just I don't maybe because my parents put that fear in. I don't know if it's just like a generational byproduct of all that, that I was a latchkey kid, I was a Gen X kid, and we just stayed out of trouble. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe it's that. Like I always understood the fuck around, find out.
Mhm.
So I think again that saved me in so many situations, and I think a lot of being in comedy, being like one of the places where it's like, yes, there's the weird guys and stuff like that, and the business can be weird, but still there's a sense of like, you're writing your stuff, you're performing. It's like it's not like you're just a empty like a blank canvas, and they're just casting you because, okay, you look like this, and go in there and deliver some lines because you have to look like that, right?
Mhm.
It's the idea that you're taking what's in your mind and you're putting it out, and people will find it funny or not funny, and you're delivering that. It gives you a sense of like there's more to it than just a face, and that's
Yeah.
why people discourage, like, oh, comedy used to be the last place where attractive people were not
Like,
supposed to be. It
okay.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all those people were in traditional acting. You ever
Yes.
heard the saying, you have a face for radio?
And that's what where my mind went is I was thinking of radio when
Yeah,
you
you have
said
a
that.
face for radio.
Yeah.
Okay. All of that stuff plays into it. And
Mhm.
that's why I said I like that now, because you see people with social media that are launching themselves, that are different things. So the system can't stop them. They're
Right.
already in there. And so that kind of opens it up for other people like
Right.
that. But again, it's all about, are you good? Are you funny? If you're funny, none of that really matters.
Yeah.
But when you're modeling, it's like you're there could be 1,000 girls that could get that job. When you're acting, a lot of those jobs, 1,000 girls would do. Like, you
Mhm.
know what I mean? What's the until you're a known person or you have a unique perspective or a voice, and they're hiring you for that, you know? So I think that part, I think, keeps you understanding that and staying in that mindset of like, you are still a commodity, but like, what are you commodifying? Am I
Mhm.
commodifying my body? Am I commodifying my thoughts, my brain? Am I putting my personal life out there? Am I commodifying my personal life? Because a lot of
Yeah.
people talk about, their marriages, and a lot of people talk about a lot of things,
Yeah.
right?
I like their upbringing or their families.
And that's where it's like, oh, is your family okay with that? Is this like
Yeah.
some of the things that we put on blast are, maybe not comfort. So there is still parts of comedy where it's like that. But again, it's personal artistic choice,
Mhm.
and you are in control of that. And so I think, it's like choose your own adventure. But yeah, the industry, I've seen a lot of things, and I'm always like, when I see girls, I'm just like, like, get a regular job, pursue it on the side, like don't let it be your only thing, and don't let yourself be in a situation as a woman. I'm a huge proponent and supporter of women just in general. Financial independence for women is like key.
Mhm.
If don't like focus first and foremost on that,
Mhm.
to be financially independent. And that's not a question of like to be rich or have a certain amount of money. It's more that whatever you make, you live below your means, and you're okay. You don't need anybody, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you have savings. So what that does for a woman, and the giving yourself peace of mind that you can do that, is life changing. And
Right.
it allows you to have space to say no to things, and to not be in bad situations, because men will prey on women in financially vulnerable situations,
Mhm.
and other types of vulnerable situations. But financial vulnerability is one of the big, and that's why, like, the idea of, oh, I just want a guy to pay for me, take care of me. Yeah, until he, well, then what? What do you have after he moves on to the
Right.
next? So number one, that's why entertainment industry isn't necessarily a good place for financial security,
Okay, that's
right?
a good point to put
It's
out
really
there
not.
because I think a lot of people come here with that idea that I'm going to make
Yeah.
it or I'm going to
Everybody has a
pursue,
job.
but everyone has a job.
You
Everyone
have
actually
to,
has a
yeah,
job.
you have to.
They're pursuing that on the side.
Yeah,
Like you,
like how are you
yeah.
going to pay your rent? It's an expensive city. You're going to have 4 roommates. Like all these things you could sacrifice for sure. We can all sacrifice for our dreams, but you still need to have a way to pay your bills and do those things and maintain yourself above ground until, and you could do that for 10 years and
Hmm.
and that's
Yeah,
fine. There's a labor of love in that. There's
of
nothing
course.
wrong with, you know what? I don't care. I want to pour coffee for 10 years that allows me to go at night.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
I think there's beauty in that. Like,
That's what I'm saying. It's a labor
yeah,
of
it's like
love.
this. It
You
is.
like I don't care what people do for work because it's again, there's as long as you do it and you do it not begrudgingly, like Khalid Gibran says in The Prophet, like do it with love and everything else that comes out of it will be like abundant in a way. But like if you're doing it like where it's like, oh, I'm supposed to be famous by now, or I'm
Mm,
supposed to be like it gets hard for people.
yeah.
It gets hard. People lose, you have to do it because you love it. And people always say, oh, God, but you have to do it because you love it.
Yeah.
And like, there's so many comedians that will never make a dollar off of this.
Yeah.
There's so many, and we're spending money on, whether it's
Right.
mics or whatever it is.
Exactly.
So it's real. Like, and I've seen a lot of people come and go,
Yeah.
because they came, with ideas.
Hmm.
They were the best in their hometown, and
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily translate.
Yeah. It doesn't always translate here
No,
in
no,
LA.
no.
Like, what's that expression? It's like you're going to be the big fish in a
You're
small,
yeah, a little fish in a
or
small pond or a big
yeah.
fish in a small pond. Here, you're a little fish in a big pond.
Yeah. Regardless of,
It's like there's so many people. SAG has like 200, like 150,000 members, and the average is like $5,000 a year for a
wow.
SAG member. So it's like, it's a pyramid where the people at the top are making the people. So it's like
Hmm.
there isn't, you know, you have to want to do it because you love it. Like I have to like do my business, and then after my business, I'm like, okay, I gotta, get this done. I gotta write this stuff, and I gotta go and do the mics, and then I gotta be, and it's like, it's, you know, it's a
It's a lot
lot,
of work.
but it's more like I love doing it.
Hmm.
So I know, okay, I can wake up earlier, I can do my workout, I can get my like I know that like now that I am in an adult situation and I can make adult decisions to do the
Hmm.
things I like to do,
Yeah.
right? But because I've worked for most of my life. But like yeah, a lot of people it's like they'll come here and it's like, "Oh, I have like $500 or 1,000." I'm like, "Please don't do this." Like it's a
Yeah.
recipe for a bad situation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm always
Please
like
listen to
discouraging. Yeah. Yeah.
Lana.
I'm always
Take
discouraging.
her
Like, please don't
advice.
come here without like, a plan and like you're gonna get a
Yeah.
job and don't be ashamed to work any job. There's nothing, like I've gotten over the years I've gotten flack for it, and I don't care because, there's nothing wrong. It's honest. Everything's, honest work.
Yeah.
So I think people get like, oh, but I could, no, do what you got
Yeah.
to do until you don't have to
No,
do it no more.
everything you've said, honestly, is such great advice. I'm glad you're saying that. I think a lot of people need to hear that. A lot of women need to hear that. Um, I mean, listen to Lana Salah. She knows what she's talking
Yeah,
about.
like
I
I tell
mean,
my nieces that. I'm like every
yeah.
day, like, listen.
No, that's so important for young women and young girls to listen to and to hear. And I'm so thankful that I got to connect with you, that we got to have this conversation. I want you to come back like in a year and I want us to do
Yeah.
this again or even
Yeah, yeah.
before, maybe every
Let's
month.
definitely do it. This was
And
awesome.
I want to
Yeah.
see you live soon.
Yeah, I have a few shows this month and I'm, still so I'll
Okay.
definitely keep
Where
in
can
touch with
people
you.
find you?
You can find me I have my website, lanasalah.com, LANASALAH.com, and on Instagram and most all social media as
Mm,
thelanasalah.com, TheLanaSalah. And yeah, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all of them, and sign up for my mailing list. So when there's shows, you'll get updates and stuff like that. But
perfect.
yeah, mhm.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks. Thank you for listening to another episode of Well Rooted. If you enjoyed today's episode and felt it brought you value, please subscribe, leave a comment, give us a like, and a review. This episode of Well Rooted has been brought to you by Girard & Associates CPAs. With locations across all of Los Angeles, Girard & Associates has been helping entrepreneurs and creatives make their dreams come true for over 2 decades. Go to girardcpa.com to learn more. This is Haneen, and we are all well rooted.